Hello and welcome to the Live Cybersecurity Awareness Forum. We're in session number 20, and this is a special time of our sessions because it's actually been, I think, close to a year since we did our very first one. And so I think we have one of our original panelists with us, Fletus Poston, from a year ago. We'll have him share his thoughts. But we're going to be talking about online tracking threats and their impacts on individuals and organizations. I think this is going to be a fun session. I typically try to keep our discussion really focused on business, for security professionals and security awareness managers to make use of this content when they're planning their programs and creating content. And I think this will be useful for them as well. But I think this topic covers both business and individual in such a way that I want to just sort of let the discussion flow. We want to hear lots of good examples and stories and comments and tips from people, because whatever you share that helps people be more secure and guarding their privacy will help them, certainly in their jobs to be more secure and confident. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we will get back to the panel. I have one more person that I see that I need to make a panelist. Here we go. And just in time, Tyler's going to join us. And Tyler was one of our originals as well. So there he is. So great to have all you guys here. Before we get into our agenda and logistics, what do you guys think after a year of the Cybersecurity Awareness Forums? Is it helping people? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go as the newest member, but I mean, I'm still excited and think this is a fantastic, kind of avenue to be able to share best practices just amongst industry, colleagues like Fletus and Tyler and some of the other panelists we've been lucky enough to have on the show. Hearing their insight, their stories, and kind of bringing it forward just kind of sparks my my imagination and gets me going every 2 weeks. So I think it's a fantastic avenue. So let's keep doing it.
Yeah, I'll echo. I think the biggest thing, and we've talked about it numerous times on here, it's a give mentality. And I like that this is a give mentality. This is not a session just to come and take. We hope that you take things away, but we're here as a community. InfoSec in general is a very small community in all grand scheme of things and professions in this world, but at the same time, it's a niche. So there's things that I like to tell people. We all work in different vectors, but we all deal with the same problems. We all deal with the certain security vulnerabilities, phishing, social engineering, exploits, but we have to do it from our lens. So that's what I like hearing from our panelists, from our attendees. How is your vector handling this risk or that risk? And what are you learning from the other vectors and how it applies?
Yeah, great insights, Fletus. Thanks very much for that. Tyler, any thoughts on the fact that we just passed our 1-year anniversary from the first awareness forum?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. But that's a trip, man. Time flies. Yeah, I'm really excited to continue doing this. I think there's a lot of valuable insights, even on our side as people working in the industry, hearing from outsiders. And hopefully, us giving content and educating those, joining us for these webinars. I really enjoy the format. We see all too often, the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that I think, kind of just browbeats people into a feeling of helplessness. And from all these webinars, I feel like we're at least working to help equip people with the skills and the knowledge that, hey, there's a lot you can do to prepare. There's a lot of knowledge out there that might not be intuitive. To draw back to Fletus's analogy from a while back, it's like a fire alarm. Nobody's perfectly prepared for a fire, but fire drill, right? Those sorts of things, can save you at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm just very thankful that people are getting value out of these things. I actually started a community before. It was called the Streetwise Security Zone, 10 years ago. with the naive thought that, all the security professionals would get in there and start sharing ideas, but security professionals don't like to share too much for obvious reasons. And so it's actually pretty hard to create a community for security professionals for that reason. There was actually a really good one called Peer List, and it was around for a few years, had lots of good content, but they actually had to shut it down because it's a lot of work. I've considered starting, a discussion forum for this community, but it is a lot of work, and we don't have the resources for that just yet. So it works just well enough, I think, right now as a newsletter list that, gets people together when we want to have a session. And I think we've had some really good discussions over the past year on a couple on Security Awareness Month. And so keep that thought in mind. It's coming up. Not too distant future. But we've talked about all kinds of things, assessing security awareness, a lot of core things for awareness professionals, but it's also nice to sometimes just get into the discussions that other security professionals have that have an impact on awareness and how we build those programs. So things that we don't always hear, when you're on LinkedIn or seeing blog posts and feeds, people are always repeating the same tips all the time, and it's a little bit monotonous, but I like to freshen things up a little bit. So really happy to have everybody here. In a moment, I'm going to ask our panelists to do a really quick introduction, but while they're doing that, I'm going to start a poll. So we always do a 3-question poll at the beginning of these sessions with some just closed-ended answers so we can get a little bit of indication from what people in the audience think about the topic that we're going to be discussing. And then afterwards, we're going to have some open questions for discussion in the panel. And feel free to type in the chat if you have any questions or comments on what people have said, or tips or stories. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I'm going to just launch the poll. And the panelists themselves can't actually respond to them. They should be able to see the poll, but hopefully you can see this. And the questions are just 3 questions. Where do you believe online tracking threats pose the most significant risks? Personal privacy and safety, business information and security, or something else? Or maybe you don't think there are any real online tracking risks. Second question is, which tracking mechanisms most concern you? Things like web histories, cookies, browser fingerprinting, or things like ad networks that do behavioral marketing and have creepy ads. We all have stories about that. I think we're going to have some fun talking there. And then maybe more interesting and scary types of tracking, maybe offline and device-based tracking. Then there are the methods that we use for reducing tracking risks. Like to know what people use right now to actually reduce their own risks from being tracked personally or for the business. So I think, there's people in there doing the poll now. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to start with, and we'll go around Fletus and then Tyler, just to do a quick intro of yourselves, and then we'll get started.
Thank you very much, Scott. I'm Ryan Healey-Ogden. I am the Director of Business Development here at ClickArmor. I also hold a position with the Cybersecurity Global Alliance, which is another great kind of resource sharing group in the cybersecurity community. Fletus, I mentioned it earlier, giving. That's kind of my passion with cybersecurity. I kind of love to educate, I love to inform, and I love to lead in this space. And I'm glad to be here. So thank you for having me again, Scott.
Thank you, Ryan. Fletus.
Fletus Poston, day job. Kind of marketing today. I'm the security operations manager for CrashPlan. We're a backup and recovery solution. As I entered many times, my passion is security evangelist. That's why I enjoy coming into these. It's like talking, and to Scott's point of view, is giving a different perspective. We all hear the same tip over and over again, which I think is imperative for learning, but always using stories. So that's why I'm excited to learn with you guys, share stories with you, and analogies that allow things to sink in and to be memorable, and that you can draw from when the event or when you're in that situation.
That's awesome. Before I turn it over to Tyler, I'd actually like to ask people if they can type in the chat where they're coming in from around the world. We get some really interesting attendees from all over the place. So just type in where you're joining us from, and we'll get back to that in 1 minute. Tyler.
Hi, my name is Tyler Sweeney. I'm a account manager and cybersecurity specialist at a managed service provider here in Bakersfield, California. I work with lots of businesses, small to medium size, in the state of California, trying to get them secure, get to deal with a lot of C-suite executives. And that's sort of where I draw my insights from, with their willingness or often unwillingness to do what is necessary.
Yeah, great. And it's great to have you. Both of you guys were, I think, in our first session. We did quite a few together, really consistent attendance. Sometimes our jobs take us away from this stuff, and I had to miss one time. Ryan filled in. So anyway, it's great to have you guys back as panelists. So just looking at who's joined us, Ryan from London, Ontario, Femi from Ottawa, Anne from Guelph, Toronto, Chengiz, Sohana from Toronto, Graham Day from Ireland. Awesome. Thanks very much, Graham. And Alex from BC, more from Ottawa, Ramara, Tim. Awesome. So yeah, thanks very much, everybody, for letting us know where you're here from. And I'm going to close the poll now. We had 13 people respond, and I'm just going to quickly share the results with people, and we can do a quick roundtable to the team of panelists. And feel free to type in anything that you observe from these questions. First of all, if they're dumb questions, and second of all, what observations you have about the results. We're going to talk about the actual content and ideas as we go through the open question part. But looks like out of 13 people that voted about where do you believe the online tracking threats present significant risks, 12 of 13 say personal privacy and safety, 10 of 13 said business information and security. So that's good. I actually wasn't sure how many people would indicate that privacy or these tracking issues would impact business. But it's good to see that people do see that connection. Which tracking mechanisms most concern you? Web history, 9 out of 13, ad networks, 11 out of 13, that's the highest, and device-based activity tracking, 5 out of 13. Other, 1 out of 13. If you remember that you chose other for this, maybe you can type in the chat what other ideas you're thinking of that could be mechanisms that concern you. And then thirdly, what mechanisms do you use to reduce those tracking risks? 10 people out of 13 said a VPN, private browsing mode, 8 of 13, privacy-based browsers like Brave or Focus, 5 out of 13, opting out of social networks, 5 out of 13, scanning devices for malware, 7, and using dedicated devices, 3 out of 13. That's getting really serious about it, right?
Yeah.
And then again, other, if you typed in other for what you use to reduce your privacy and tracking risks, please type that in the chat as well. So while we're waiting for the others to enter their other ideas, how about just a quick take on the poll results without getting into too much detail about the content we'll talk about later. Ryan?
Yeah. First off, we got one of our others there. Timothy King said Pi-hole. Fantastic. DNS filtering, way to go.
So that's a tool that you would use for?
Yeah, that would be falling under the tools of others. So where do I think the threats lie? I think, yes, personal privacy, but I think businesses have a big, larger risk that they don't necessarily know about. I think a lot of consumers have been educated, but I think a lot of businesses are falling behind on that. The tracking mechanisms that concern me, again, we know about web history, ad networks, and device-based tracking. Those things are fairly out there, and we have remediation for those. It's the others that are challenging to me. Those are the apps that don't even have a trace on your phone, and different things like that. And I'm sure will come up later. And then what methods? I agree with all of these, but I think it's more of a combination of. Like for me, I'd probably almost check every one of those boxes as far as what I do, for my own personal and professional, privacy. So I think there's a lot of knowledge in this room. So that's exciting.
Nice. Fletus?
I'm not surprised by the responses. I'm going to hold some stuff back because I think people see these as face value and forget about what some of those things do under the hood. Depending on if it's a subscription model, not a subscription model for a lot of these services. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's the generation we live in today, not maybe the generation we are, but the generation we live in today. We're SaaS-based predominantly. And I'll share more about that here in a little while. That I had a conversation and I posted recently on LinkedIn regarding something that I think this audience would find
Cool.
insightful. So
Excellent. Tyler, are you with us?
Yep. Sorry, was able to finally get the computer up and running.
Nice.
Yeah, that's about what I expected using a VPN. I know we'll get into some methods here. I dove deep down this rabbit hole, especially with browser fingerprinting. I mean, we all see the VPN ads. You know, the fact that they're so heavily marketed is a little suspect to me. But that's a little side tangent. But
not only that, but I think misleading marketing there too sometimes, right? They'll talk about, actually there was one case, I don't want to get into too many stories. Maybe we'll save this one. I just thought of one that just remind me. It's about oh boy, I'll think of it later. Anyway, I'll let you go. Any other last thoughts, Tyler?
I like that people are at least aware of the browser fingerprinting. That's one that's much harder to combat. I know we'll get into that in a little bit. And to follow up on your point about VPNs, the ads you hear, oh, they track your IP address. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that just think, oh, I got my VPN, they can't track me. It's a different IP address.
Yeah.
And ad networks, the companies that are data brokers, they have a huge profit incentive to figure out who you are and market towards you. And they're getting better and better at it, which means, conversely, we have to get better and better at preventing it, if not just for privacy. I mean, there's also the malicious side of that, right? Because that data is out there.
Yep. Okay.
Just as another other from the chat there, I think Anne might have meant when she said, what other methods to reduce tracking? Her other is, well, I live with a network security architect, so they have a Palo Alto firewall, an ESET, and uBlock. Oh, and there's an IPS as well. Don't forget the biometrics. So you can definitely see how the level of security increases as the number of security professionals in the household increases.
How does the comment 1Password, how does that relate to tracking or tracking risks?
The one thing I can think of, because that's a tool I've used, is they have a cool integration with privacy.com, the virtual private credit cards.
Oh, okay.
And it automatically integrates. You can create private cards because to me it's a great password tool, password manager. That I use in conjunction. You can use, I think they have other like burner email services that integrate with it as well.
Like one-time emails and
Oh, neat.
So then you can have, instead of using your card across all these different websites, you have, one-time use cards, one-time emails, because of course that's how they're, tracking you. Those are some of the things they'll track you about: your card number, your name, email, especially, because most people, they have one or two emails. They're not using burner email services.
Yeah. And I don't know if we mentioned it, but Ryan Morgan mentioned in the chat, Google or Apple Mac address grabbing from nearby devices.
There he goes.
I don't think we really covered that in our list of whole things.
No,
so I guess
we did not have spoofing your own MAC address. Well done, Ryan.
Yeah.
He must have been paying attention to his teacher in school.
I'm not sure he's talking about spoofing. I think he's talking about network discovery. So if I'm on the same network as another iPhone, I see all the other iPhones. The funnest is to do that on an airplane.
Yeah. But there's options in the iOS, right, to do temporary MAC addresses.
Yeah. When you select a network, you can spoof the MAC address. I know the way I had my Mac configured was I had a script set to where it spoofed the MAC address upon it, every boot. Although, that's just me being paranoid for the most part.
Cool. All right. Well, let's get into some more deeper discussion. Feel free. I'm not going to limit where we go with this, so it's going to be interesting to hear what kinds of comments we get. We kind of like to do a little bit of context setting at the beginning of these sessions. So I got a couple of slides here that I'll go through, and a lot of this is taken from a single article that I thought was really good. It was from Tech Radar, and it basically covers all the different kinds of web tracking, as well as some device tracking, I think. We've just covered some of these things. That QR code is usable to get to that link. So when we do the video version of this, the recording, you'll be able to pick up the QR code as well. Or if you want me to go back to it, I will. But let's just skip through these things. Who is doing the tracking, right? So we talk about scary tracking. Who are the people we're talking about? Well, Number one, we've mentioned already advertisers, right? There are also governments, and a lot of times it's oppressive governments trying to look at what's happening with their own citizens and their interactions with other people. And then employers, to some degree, it may not be really far-reaching, but it's worth discussing. Family and friends, certainly there's an element of, parental controls, which may go beyond parental controls at some point. But these are the people that, I tended to identify there. The other thing that we looked at was, the government, and you may have heard of the spyware called Pegasus, which was developed and is sold by the NSO group. I think they're out of Israel. And Pegasus software is pretty scary because it can be used to attack mobile devices, mobile phones specifically, in very surreptitious ways. There's a lot of no-click attacks, meaning when a message is sent by SMS, for example, to somebody's phone, it may literally infect the phone without you even knowing it, just by the fact that it's receiving that message. And that could start some kind of spyware or tracking on your device. And then the impacts from tracking, you're looking at, what is happening with a particular person, or, you can understand the people, since we talked about who's doing the tracking, we're looking at, what kind of visibility, what can they do with that information to collect your data and maybe either discriminate against you or maybe even track you down from a physical point of view. And then it can also be used for, influencing you. Think about things like, what was it, Cambridge Analytica, right? Once you understand where people are and what they're doing, and you have that information, you can start targeting people for messaging to particularly change their perspective, for perhaps. And for businesses, think about it from the point of view of, okay, if employees are being tracked, does that reveal things about your strategic plans? Could it expose the business to fraud if somebody knows too much about the patterns of what people are doing? And we talked a little bit about the tools and remediations. So, tracker blockers, uBlock Origin is one that I've used, and I saw mentioned in our chat. And DNS filtering, basically preventing you from going to particular places or making queries that might actually transmit that information back to the people that are trying to track you. And the use of private search engines such as DuckDuckGo and Brave, which are built to limit tracking to some extent. Doesn't necessarily mean you're invisible. We can talk about how effective these things are. VPNs we'll have a good discussion on, and then clearing your cache and cookies, things that are lying around on your computer, could be picked up and used to track what you're doing. And there are also apps that can be used to detect tracking apps. So those would be good to learn about as well.
That MVT program is the only way you can right now I guess disclose if you have Pegasus on a device.
Oh, is that right? Okay, that's great. Cool. Okay, well, let's start into our open questions and see where the discussion goes. So for the panel and anybody in the audience, what types of online tracking threats pose the greatest risks to individuals and organizations from your point of view? So I'll start with Ryan again.
I guess my two right now, I think, would be if we kind of want to talk topically in Canada, it's kind of I would say foreign interference through kind of misinformation, and that is done through kind of this tracking and surveillance and at a very high level. So now we have Canadian politicians being kind of tracked, monitored, and made threats against. We have our own citizens like you and me. We have been influenced by advertising to try and make a decision. And so these are the things that I'm starting to see where it's a little bit above and beyond the normal kind of, oh, I think they know I'm shopping for a new iPhone, or oh, like a pair of shoes I googled last week showed up in my newsfeed 35 times. Now it's more like all of a sudden targeted political ads are starting to show up. and you're starting to wonder, okay, well, why is this happening? Well, it's because you fit in a certain demographic, and you may be an eligible voter, you may not have made a decision, and you've checked all these boxes, and based on your web profile and your advertising profile and all the different metrics they can gather around you, they can put targeted ads in front of you to try and, again, sway you in one direction or another. So that one I kind of see. And then from one of my favorite stories about tracking is from 2018 with the U.S. Government and the whole Strava GPS tracking incident. So basically, there all these U.S. soldiers deployed around the world were using Fitbits and other types of sports monitoring devices like we all have, and they were all getting their 30,000 steps in and all their workouts and stuff, and syncing everything to the cloud. Well, the Strava heat map then was produced, and that was showing exactly where these little GPS pings were for people around the world. That's great, benign information, until you start to go into countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, where there were no heat map signals at all, which is expected, except for these small little pockets that were strategically placed all around these different countries. Well, quickly it was revealed that those were U.S. military bases, and those were U.S. Soldiers that are now completely exposed and open with kind of open source intelligence. So it's through kind of tracking in that sense as well that it can become a national security issue, and obviously knowing what troop movement for an enemy that's pretty detrimental to security. So those are kind of two things that kind of come top of my mind outside of the standard group of things.
And those are exactly the kinds of stories, right, that are useful when you're trying to educate employees and individuals about the risks. Right? You look for the news stories. It may be a little sensational and maybe a little far-fetched, but I think that it's useful to keep those things in people's minds.
I mean, trade secrets are trade secrets for companies as well. You could have a production facility you don't want people to know where it is, but if all of your employees of a sudden light up a heat map, your competition does now know where to look.
Yeah,
it changes things.
Yeah, for sure. Fletus.
Yeah, I was going to go with that story for Ryan, so I'll add a little bit more. But in general, like our IoT devices, our smart devices that are constantly pinging for a GPS signal, trying to triangulate where you're at, which is great for GPS coordinates. But when you start logging in, let's just say with my same account into multiple places, business and personal, now I'm linking, this is my route to work. Like I'll allude right now, I have Apple Play and our CarPlay.
Yeah.
I get in my car certain mornings, it goes ahead and assumes where I'm going. It tells me where it knows I'm going because it's tracked my location enough to know that on this day I go to this coffee shop, on this day I go to this restaurant. It's telling me when I log into my car, hey, here's how long it's going to take you to get to that location. So those are things because I've logged in and I've allowed it, so it knows my commute, it knows where I'm going certain days. And then the same thing with our watches, like it knows when I'm running. So if someone compromises my GPS coordinates, let's just say it's my wife running, they now know when my wife's going to turn the corner. Now they know when my kid's going to get off the bus if my kid's wearing a smartwatch. So this gets into that under 13 legislation that's going right now. What can companies collect for a minor? What can companies log into? We have to get into that privacy setting where you apply it personally. I can track family members just by the technology that they wear or carry, just because location is turned on in certain apps that you may not realize. That goes back to the mobile security conversation. What apps have location turned on? Does it need to have your location turned on? And does it need to know the location just to use a calculator?
Yeah. Great points. Tyler.
Oh, Fletus. That was beautiful. The location thing. I tell everybody, you look on their settings on iPhones. I'm an iOS user, and they got location always allowed for all these apps. Yeah. My word to the wise on that is disable all of it. Most of it you can disable and you won't notice a difference. If I want to tag, an Instagram photo in a certain location, I'll go turn my location on, do the photo, turn it back off. Or the same thing with the camera roll. You don't need access to all my photos all the time. I'll give you access to, whatever I need to send. But as far as, these tracking threats, and to add on to Ryan's point, especially as, stateside here, we're gearing up for election season. And that's always particularly pleasant for everybody. Of course not. But and we saw how this has gone in the past, and with the amount of data out there and the general apathy of people towards giving out their data and not doing anything to significantly mitigate it. That always worries me in terms of geopolitical things. Yeah, to me, it's, we're finally getting some of these legislations. In California, we have the CCPA, and the EU, you have certain, data protection policies, but they make it hard to opt out. So I hope that, we can see legislation, sort of heading in the right direction. But, one of my little tips is just your browser, disable third-party cookies. You don't need people tracking you across sites. You can disable them. Everything works fine. And it's just little things like that can, once you do enough of those things, tend to make a difference.
Yeah. And here's another tip. If it's free, chances are it's tracking the hell out of you.
That was going to be my comment earlier, is when we're talking about free subscriptions. Like, there's free things you can install that will suppress third parties, but will not suppress their ads. That's what Scott's going to probably lead into it a little bit. My VPN now knows I'm using its VPN. So it's going to advertise, hey, I've got this new service, or I'm going to show you my VPN everywhere I go, because it's tracking me because I didn't pay for a subscription. If I paid for it, you'll likely see that suppressed. And if you don't, you can go in and change your settings to suppress what your paid subscription can and cannot collect to you. And to Tyler's point, we have to be able to opt out. And you're seeing more and more legislation from the EU, the US, and other places to allow and force you, if a customer, the paying customer, asks for you to remove their data, you have to remove it, or you have to share what you're collecting. And that could be, as I alluded earlier, the GPS coordinates. Are you tracking everywhere I move? Do you know when I'm stationary? I mean, I think the first time I ever looked at my Google location, when Google was getting prominent, I could watch every time I got on a plane. Like, it would watch, like, I literally tracked all of my travel for 6 months. It knew where I was at, what I was going, how I was doing it.
Yeah, it builds timelines, and it tries to present it back to you. It's like, oh, check out your timeline. It's like, well, that's kind of creepy. Like,
so another thing too, we didn't talk about that I think is Brian just triggered, is the fact that Amazon is now buying iRobots. What is it collecting about your house footprint now when it's cleaning?
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of? It's kind of funny. When Google Street View came out, and it was pretty cool. You could, go down any street and see stuff. And then they had the questions about, we got to blur out these things and those things. There was a German satire piece. It's probably still on YouTube, called Home View. And it was basically a team of people going to random people's houses saying, hi, we're here from Google Home View. We're going to map your house. And they're going, oh, really? And they walked around the house filming it, asking them about their bedrooms. And it was just really crazy. But that's kind of what the iRobot and...
well, why does my vacuum need like multiple cameras and like a full microphone array?
Yeah. Really. The thing I was going to mention actually about, the risks, I think it's disingenuous by some of these VPN companies, especially when we, as you pointed out, Fletus, if you're not paying them, they're going to monetize what you're giving them to some degree. But I saw it really annoyed me the other day. I was at a coffee shop, and I went into, I don't know, Starbucks or someplace. And as I launched it, I was going to look at something at NordVPN's website or something like that, or I might have just been doing a geo IP lookup to see where it thought I was. And there's this NordVPN ad that pops up and says, you are not protected. But I literally was using a VPN at the time. So it was incorrect in assessing that I was not protected. It's just not protected because they didn't recognize me.
Yeah, they can filter the fact that your IP address is associated with a VPN, I guess, and so then they're going to present you like.
Apparently not, because I don't think they would have made that assertion if they had known I was actually using a VPN.
True.
That's a good sign, though. That means that was that might be a private server. For me, NordVPN. When you look at most of these VPNs, almost all of them. Like 90% of the market is owned by just a handful of companies, and they're just using the same VPN servers and reskinning them. Yeah. So like for me, the amount of VPN providers I'll recommend, I can do on one hand. Yeah. And to Fletus's point, and this is, if you're going to take one thing away, it's if you're not paying for it, you are the product. You're the product. There's
somebody's got to monetize it, pay for it.
Nobody does anything for free. Yeah. Oh, I see Molvad down there.
Yeah, I've used Molvad too. That's pretty cool.
It's Molvad and Proton. Those are the two I'll stake my claim on. One other thing with as far as tracking that's not necessarily, browser related, sort of like we're talking, is the IMSI Stingray tracking. I don't know if any of you guys have heard
Oh,
about
yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So
Good topic.
effectively
Let's go in there.
So with, and we have protests, here in the US and in Canada. And of course, that's, part of a functioning democracy, assuming they stay peaceful, right? But when, these things happen, you'll see planes or helicopters flying overhead. And effectively what they have is a device that is spoofing being the strongest cell tower in an area. So I'm sure you guys are aware when you see crime shows, they go, oh, we triangulated their location based on cell towers. What this is doing is saying, hey, I'm the best cell tower, and everybody's phone is pinging it with their device identifier, trying to connect with it. So it's a man in the middle attack.
Yep.
And that's why, you'll see recommendations of never bring your phone, to a protest.
Yeah, well,
They
you have
don't need
burner
to-
phones. I sat on the other side of the fence, Tyler, and when I worked for a telecom company, we would have to get requests from law enforcement because they were using those devices. And so they would kind of have the cache of data. They would turn to us and be like, do these accounts belong to you? We'd end up with a subpoena, and we would have to turn over account information so they could put together the piece. So
what they call the lawful access process, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that was happening about 10 years ago in Canada, and it's they've been utilizing that for quite a long time.
Yeah, and to Tyler's point, I think people forget. I mean, maybe they don't, but they don't think about it. The amount of technology we carry around with us, like we forget to leave things at home. Like if you pretend like a soldier, let's just go back to the Fitbit or to their running apps. It's harmless to them to wear their smartwatch. They don't think about it until their commanding officer or their company tells them, like if you've got a stiff, you're not allowed to bring electronics into certain rooms just because of microphones, because of camera access. There's privacy concerns just by having that smartphone in your pocket, not just for the GPS coordinates, but the fact that what it can do. It can listen, which we can talk about in a little bit. There's ads that listen all the time and give you ads listening to what you're talking about. Have a good story there. And then the other one is the fact that you can take a photo. Two things. You took a photo of it. Now I have a copy of it, and I've got metadata behind that photo to tell me exactly where I took that photo, unless I cleared it, and then I post it somewhere. Now Fletus took a photo of this item that's in this building, or it's at this XY axis. Like it's triangulated exactly where that photo was taken.
Yeah, it's quite surprising what's being tracked and what's being monitored and what's going on. Another quick one, if you want to go out but take your technology with you, Faraday bags. I don't know if anyone carries one of those around with them, but I do. My keys also live in those. If anyone's been worried in the news about kind of your car being stolen from the repeater kind of thing, Faraday bags. You want your phone to go black, Faraday bags. So there's another tip for us.
Yeah, I don't know if people know that I'm a co-host on the Shared Security show, a podcast with Tom Eston and Kevin Johnson. Been doing it since 2009, but Silent is a company that has Faraday bags. They're one of our sponsors. SLNT, I think they go by now. They've got a whole range of things from keys to laptop bags. And I think even backpacks, if I'm not mistaken.
We haven't really talked about too, but these near field communications. Tyler talked about virtual cards, the physical cards we carry.
Yep.
Yes, it's not easily spoofed, but it is tracked. Like when I scan my phone or when I open up my watch to do a tapless, like when I want to tap to pay with my smartwatch or my phone, again, that's triangulated. The billing company knows exactly where I am.
Yep.
Just because I didn't swipe a card, but I tapped this near-field communication.
And Google or Apple will also be capturing that data. So that's the other thing with data capture. It's not just like one company, right? In that one transaction, Fletus, you've got multiple parties down the line that have captured your data of where you are, how much you spent, what it was, what the demographic is. And that then all of a sudden you have a profile. Right. And we're not too far away that if you're in a mall and you do this and then you walk out, like there'll be targeted ads for you, like on the billboards within
just
the
like
mall.
in Minority Report.
That's not that far off, and it's not that crazy how fast, right, with generative AI and everything else, that we can actually take a profile of a person and spin up an exact kind of ad just for them.
So Nordstrom got in trouble with this. They had repeaters people catching to their Wi-Fi and targeting ads depending on where they were at in the store. Like Nordstrom.
Yeah, I saw the same thing about
And it happens
Bluetooth
at
as well.
it happens at conferences that we all go to as well. I mean, how many times, but where was I? It was Sector last fall. I was taking a quiet moment away, and I found there was a guy in a corner around a corner with his own Wi-Fi router set up and plugged in. And you're like,
Well,
so you're at
pineapple.
yeah, but you're at a security conference and there's someone trying to, intercept and potentially, grab data, grab info and everything else. QR codes. I mean, those are going to track you every time you scan one. I know we use them in this, but
Not maliciously.
Not maliciously though.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to just share my screen again and go back to our next guided question if I can. Uh-oh. There we are. My whole screen went black. Hopefully you guys can still see me.
Yep. All good over here.
Good. So, we talked a little bit already about what technologies are available to combat online tracking threats. There's quite a laundry list there. Did we miss anything yet?
No, I don't think so. I mean, personally, I think I'm a DNS filtering guy, right? So basically,
so how does that work? How does that protect you?
So that will use filtering lists to kind of stop the trackers before they even kind of get to your network is the easiest way to kind of describe it. So you can use external DNS filtering services. I think NextDNS is a good example of that. You can set up a pie hole on your own network. As Timothy King mentioned, that's just a small Android box. There's one sitting right here on my desk, and that literally just connects into my network. It filters all the web traffic on my network before it gets to any of my devices. Then I get to choose what kind of filtering lists and how aggressive that is. So I can stop all trackers, I can stop all ads, I can stop all adult websites, I can stop all gambling. You can kind of pick and choose. So it's kind of like it's parental controls on steroids, where you can really kind of fine tune it. You can whitelist, you can blacklist things as well. So that's my number one. I still use a VPN connecting out to the external world. And I also use a kind of a non-standard operating system. I mean, it is standard, but I use Linux-based operating systems, which just has a lot less tracking, telemetry, and everything else, built in, against that kind of the Microsoft or the Apple world that just kind of comes out of the box of here's your operating system. It came with your computer, but it is loaded with kind of tracking and different things like that, because again, they want that data from us as part of the agreement to be their consumer. And then plugins in your browsers. I guess that's the other one I use as well.
But to add to that, I mean, to add the DNS conversations, let's just say you've got a school or you've got a small business or you've got a family that you want to, there are safe browsing DNSs that you can hard code into your thing. They will limit pretty much anything that's above an 18. So any website that's mature will never resolve in your environment. So most of your ads tend to have to be rated high just because the ad company doesn't know who's hosting what behind their content delivery network. They CDN. So that's another way of simply just putting a single change and to use a Cloudflare safe search or another vendor safe DNS resolver will do it. And then I forgot the second point here. See if it'll come back to me.
Ryan was mentioning spyware and stuff, and early
bloatware.
on.
Yes, bloatware. That's where I was going. Your Windows box have so much bloatware, so all these vendors are pushed out there because they're partners, they're sponsors. Well, when you log in now, Windows makes you log in with an account to set up unless you backdoor it. You have to set up a live account or an account. Now every bloatware or spyware, whatever you want to call it, you can argue the term, now knows that this email account is tied to you and it's tied to all the services. Even if you never activate the subscription, it's based in that this account is tied to this just because it's registered.
The other crazy thing with that too is for Windows now, yes, you're forced to have that account, especially Windows 11, right? So you have to have a Windows live account in order to access your system. As soon as you sign in with that account, it also creates you a OneDrive account. And what most users don't know, that right off the top, anything that you put in your My Documents, My Pictures, My Music, and downloads, those typical Windows folders, they're automatically synced to OneDrive. So from day one that you're using your computer, if you could go an entire year and you don't even understand that your entire life of whatever you've been typing, creating, and saving is also sitting on a Microsoft OneDrive account, in the cloud. That information can be indexed. That information could be accessed. I mean, that is another, kind of extension of how we agree to these services, but we don't really know what we're agreeing to.
Yeah.
But who has a Chromebook here? That's the other thing. Chromebook has local storage. So
How many?
I was talking about earlier. I talked with generations today, they don't understand folder structures. They just hit a control search. They just search for a piece of a data, a piece of a file. They don't know what a document is because their document doesn't sit on their device.
They don't know where it is. No.
The document is sitting in the iCloud, your Google Drive, in your case, OneNote or OneDrive. So like users today have freely given away non-data protected files.
Why do you think we've given hundreds of millions of Chromebooks have been given for free to North American education systems? I know Google has a heart, but at the same time, Google also is now creating their own ecosystem of potential future people, right? They're tracking kids from the day they walk into like grade 6, and they could follow them all the way until the day they graduate university, because once you're in this Chrome ecosystem and you keep using this, computer, like they think about how much data they're getting back for these free donations, to the education sector. It's shocking.
So this has been a really good discussion. I'm going to have to wrap it up in a little bit, but one thing I did want to cover, Ryan, earlier you mentioned spyware and some tools to, detect and remove potential tracking software. I think that would be a good topic to just go into one last thing before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about like kind of the Pegasus software, so there's the Pegasus project, and where that's more of kind of like a not-for-profit kind of group of concerned citizens and activists and stuff. Because what happened with Pegasus is, yes, it was developed for government use only by the NSO group out of Israel, but unfortunately, we know that they also are open to the highest bidder. So that software has been sold to other agencies that probably shouldn't have it, and in turn has been used to track journalists, politicians around the world, people of interests, in very kind of non-ethical ways. That being said, we need to then also have to figure out how to discover this. So there's an open source tool. You have to compile, and basically you make an image of your phone, and then through kind of a forensic analysis, search through that image to go through the logs to find if the Pegasus tool has been installed on your phone. That's one of the few ways that you can actually determine if something like that at such a high level, right? Now, that being said, for kind of the consumers and stuff, there's a lot of great tools out there that we can get, that plugins for browsers that'll kind of clear your cache cookies. There's a lot of different things about guides you can get online as well from consumers and businesses about just hardening Windows. Is always a good way to kind of get rid of that bloatware and the telemetry. But it's also just, I think the number one thing is education. I think and if we're going to talk about how to kind of get.
And while Ryan's doing that, I'm going to put up the ClickArmor slide.
Yeah, but and it's just a natural segue though, because when my eyes were open to it, I then therefore took it more serious, right? Tyler, Fletus, I'm sure you guys are the same way, especially living and breathing this world. And as we encounter more problems, we put our radar up even more, and we kind of double down. So my theory is with this is like I tell these anecdotal stories to my friends and my family and my neighbors and stuff in hopes of just making them aware, so then they're going to go home and try and think about it and improve their own security. So I say to corporations and companies, they need to take this seriously, and they need to understand, if an employee understands what's being tracked, how it's being tracked, and how it's being used, all of a sudden, that human nature might kick in of like, wait a second, I don't like that.
They're going to be more receptive to at least guidance on how to protect themselves. And if you're helping them protect their personal information, then they'll understand better how to protect the business information. So that's our sort of integrated pitch for ClickArmor, who brings this series of sessions to you. It's an interactive security awareness training platform that we're really proud of, and it really engages employees to learn and manage risks better. So we'll leave it at that for the ClickArmor pitch today. Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to announce. So next session is already scheduled, and it is Preparing for Security Awareness Month 2023. Yay! If you haven't had enough of Security Awareness Month, well, we haven't talked about it since September, October. So I think we joked when we originally started creating this series. My idea was, what were we going to call it? I thought we could call it This Month in Security Awareness Month, because every month should be Security Awareness Month.
Every month,
but
should be,
But having worked with a number of organizations to help them design Security Awareness Month activities, I recognize a lot of the activity and planning starts in June, July. So that's why I'd like to have a session June 14th, and we'll talk about planning, budgeting, tips, things that will make your Security Awareness Month more successful. So it's going to be a really fun session, lots of good value there, I think, for anybody who is responsible for creating and running a security awareness program. So that's it for this week. So I'll give the team one last round table, and anybody who has any thoughts around the most impactful thing you learned in this session. What's your biggest takeaway, Ryan?
I think we just need to educate people. I mean, I'm just going to put this out there. If there's anyone who's listening here and who wants to learn more or is worried about a certain tracking type, reach out on LinkedIn. This is kind of the thing where, and I can't speak for Fletus and Tyler directly, but this is our passion, guys. And this is the stuff that we understand and we'd love to kind of pass on to you. So if there are any questions out there, feel free to connect after the fact and we can have those conversations. I learned a little bit more about the Pegasus project while, diving deep into this and preparing for it, and it's extremely scary. Literally, with if you look down at your phone and see a missed WhatsApp call, yikes.
Yeah,
cool. That's how simple it is. So
nice.
Again, thanks for having me, Scott. It was a pleasure to be here as always, everyone.
Great. Tyler, I'll let you chime in this time.
I just think taking some of these steps and making sure they're the right steps. I sent a link in the chat for privacyguides.org.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really, really good resource. My recommendations are, get a Firefox browser, stop giving Chromium all the love. Firefox is better, and you can harden it way better.
Nice.
LibreWolf is a hardened version. A good VPN is key.
Nice.
I always recommend an outbound and inbound firewall that you can monitor traffic on your computer. I have one here on Mac OS.
Yep.
If you just take a look at that once, you will be amazed. Turn off diagnostics, sending data to whoever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really just recommend. There's a lot of good resources out there based on your operating system. And for me, it always comes down to what is your threat level, right? Because we could host a 4-hour webinar on how to harden everything. Because for uBlock, for example, we brought up uBlock. If you can use uBlock, that's great, good filterless. I use uBlock on hard mode where I'm blocking as many scripts as possible because JavaScript is the devil, but you need it to work.
Cross-site scripting worries here, Tyler.
All right, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Fletus, last word.
The other thing we didn't talk about is we all talked about browser security. We didn't really dive into it, but use a browser for different things. So if you've got one account, put Brave could be dedicated to this. Like I do crypto. So Brave is my crypto. That's the only place I have a plugin to do my crypto wallets. Like I have other stuff that's Chromium based. So Edge or Chrome. And then to Tyler's point, there are certain things that I only do in Firefox, and there's certain accounts I will log in with. I don't log into all of them with the same profile because every browser has its own profile that's stored locally on your box. The cookie is per browser.
Yeah.
So if you only do certain activities in that browser, it doesn't cross to another browser until you log back into that browser with that email. As we talked earlier, don't contaminate.
That's right. And that's why a lot of businesses, give dedicated devices to, new contractors or employees. Everything should be just isolated for them.
I do separate user profiles within the operating system for separate tasks and things as well. Compartmentalization is key.
And on Firefox, this is the one extension. Use containers and temporary containers. You can set up containers where the cookie is so for example, you want to stay logged into Google, you have a Google container. That cookie, it's basically like having a bunch of different browsers in one.
Nice.
It's a little bit of a
Tyler and I need a chart one day of all of our paranoia / hardening.
To go with that, if you want to be business centric, use a remote browser isolation. So it's called an RBI. You can install those in your company. So you don't have to put plugins, because we all know plugins are risks. Every time you put a plugin, you've now weakened the browser security.
Okay, folks. Excellent discussion. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you on the 14th.